Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tips. My name is Julian, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about our drops for week one of the fantasy hockey season. Which players should you consider cutting from your team before week one of the season even starts? Now, let me say before this video, I don't have any super hot takes for week one because we have to go and see how things play out before we really consider dropping anyone important from our team. That being said, there are still quite a few players that are owned in a lot of leagues that really shouldn't be. So stay tuned to see who I think you should cut from your team before week one even starts. Before we get started, guys, please leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. Again, more than half of you guys that watch these videos are not subscribed, so if you hit that button, it would mean the world to me, and I'm trying to get to 5,000 subscribers by the end of the season, so I would definitely appreciate if you hit that subscribe button. Let's get into it now, and let's start with our forwards that we're considering dropping before week one even starts. And first on the list is Max Pacioretty at 62% rostered, and the reason for that is because he's out until February. Now, in some leagues you have a ridiculous amount of IR spots, and obviously you should be keeping Max Pacioretty. But if you're drafted a team and already you have quite a few injuries, and you also have Max Pacioretty, it may not be worth keeping Max Pacioretty because it's just going to hurt you in the long term because you're not going to be able to put other players on IR. And Max Pacioretty, while he will be awesome for a playoff run later down the stretch, he's definitely someone that could hurt your chances of making the playoffs if you get too many injuries. So if you drafted him and you don't really have too many injuries right now, hold on to him. But if that ever comes up and you have a ridiculous amount of injuries, you may have to consider letting him go. Then I have Vasily Podkolzin, who's playing on the third line right now with Bo Horvat and Nils Höglander. And I don't absolutely love that deployment for him. I don't think it's particularly horrible, but honestly, Podkolzin did not have that great of a year in his rookie season last year. And unless he took an absolutely huge step over the offseason, I'm not expecting that much more for him. I'm not really sure why he's 59% rostered. There's definitely players out there, if you have Podkolzin, that are probably better to own for your fantasy team. If you want to be safe, you can watch him over the first few games of the year and make sure that he's not going to just explode this year, but I highly doubt that that's going to be the case, and I'd probably consider grabbing somebody else off your waiver wire instead of Vasily Podkolzin. And then I have Juraj Slafkovsky of the Montreal Canadiens, who's owned in 43% of leagues, and it doesn't look like right now, guys, that he's going to be making the team for opening night. So if you drafted Slafkovsky, there's not really any reason to be keeping him at this point because he's not going to make the team. If anything, if he plays super well in the AHL, he could be elevated later on in the year, but he's really not worth keeping on your roster unless you are in a dynasty league. And then I have Sean Couturier, 24% rostered, and there's a very good chance, guys, that Sean Couturier doesn't play the entire season this year. There's a lot of worry surrounding his injury. And if you drafted Couturier, there's not really a whole lot of reason to be keeping him right now, unless you're in like the deepest of league and you have a lot of IR spots. But right now, it's not looking good for Sean Couturier. And then I have Shane Wright, 20% rostered, and it doesn't really look like he's going to be making the roster either for the Seattle Kraken. So not great for this year's draft class. So Shane Wright is someone that I'm not high on right now unless something absolutely magical happens and he somehow does make the roster. So if I did draft Shane Wright, he's not someone that I'm dropping right away. I'm going to check and make sure that he doesn't actually make the roster before I do. But that's something that's a definite possibility. And if he doesn't make the roster, he's quite an easy drop unless you're in a dynasty league. Jumping into defenseman now, and first on the list I have Owen Power, who's somehow rostered in 88% of leagues. And last year in a small sample size, he managed to get 3 points in 8 games, which wasn't terrible, and his peripherals were nothing too spectacular. I'm not expecting a huge leap this year. Obviously, Owen Power is an incredibly talented year, and I think he is going to have a solid year. But as long as Rasmus Dahlin is healthy, Power is not going to see top power play time, and that's really going to hurt his ceiling. So him being owned in 88% of leagues is just really high. People have really high expectations for this guy, and I just don't think he's going to be able to hit them with the deployment that he's going to get. I think there is a possibility that he can hit 40 points this year, but the peripherals won't be that plentiful, and that's why 88% of leagues is just high, and he's going to end up being dropped in quite a few leagues. If you're in a shallow league, I definitely consider grabbing another defenseman with a lot more upside than Owen Power. Then I have Jared Spurgeon of the Minnesota Wild. Didn't think I'd have him here, but 75% rostered. And as of right now, Kalen Addison is the guy on the top power play for Minnesota. If he sticks there, Jared Spurgeon is someone that we're going to have to consider dropping because that really, really hurts his fantasy value. He's only going to be manning that second power play right now, and that's significantly worse for Minnesota than the top unit. So Spurgeon is someone who's lost a lot of value this year, and if you drafted him, I'm sorry. Unfortunately, he's really not going to have as much value this year. I'm not dropping him right away because Kalen Addison may not stick on that top power play, but he's definitely someone I'm going to be looking to drop if Addison does do well on that top unit. Then I have Jake Sanderson of the Ottawa Senators, and you guys know I was not high on him over the offseason. As long as Shabbat is healthy, he's also not going to be getting top power play, much like Owen Power. I don't think he's going to be able to do that much to help your fantasy team. I don't think he's going to be that fantasy relevant, guys. And that's why I don't think Jake Sanderson is someone that should be owned in over 50% of leagues. That's just crazy to me. And I have Damon Severson of the New Jersey Devils. And last year, he had an amazing end of the year. Played on that top power play unit and just really looked good. But this year, I think Dougie Hamilton is going to have himself a really, really nice bounce back. And he's going to be the guy manning that top power play unit. And because of that, I don't see Severson having a whole lot of value, and I don't think he should be owned in 50% of leagues. And then finally, for a defenseman, I have Keandre Miller, who had only 20 points in a full 82-game season last year, which isn't particularly great. Had some pretty decent hits and blocks numbers, but other than that, didn't do a whole lot. Didn't end up doing that much for fantasy last year, and the deployment that he has this year hasn't really changed. At best, he's going to get power play 2-time, and it looks like he may not even get that. I don't see him getting more than 25, 30 points this year with okay peripherals. I just don't know why Keandre Miller is owned in 38% of leagues. That just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. Jumping into goalies now, and these are not guys that I'm going to be dropping right away, but they're definitely guys that I'm going to be keeping an eye on and dropping if they're not getting the share of starts that they deserve. Spencer Knight, 89% rostered, is going to be splitting starts with Sergei Bobrovsky. Now, if Spencer Knight struggles at all, he's not going to be getting that many starts. Sergei Bobrovsky has a huge salary, and they're definitely going to want to justify that and by giving him as many starts as possible. So, Spencer Knight last year was given a decent share of the starts, struggled, and then Bobrovsky got a whole lot of starts. Hopefully that's not the case this year, and Knight can get about half the starts in Florida, but he's definitely someone I'm worried about this year. And I'm definitely going to keep an eye on dropping him if his start share starts to go down. Then I have Semyon Varlamov, 51% rostered, and the Islanders traditionally like to split their goalie starts 50-50-ish, but Sorokin is just such a good goalie that this year he may just get the vast majority of the starts. We're going to have to see how that goes down, but if Semyon Varlamov is only starting 1 out of every 4 games or so, he is not someone that's really fantasy viable, and therefore should be dropped. As of right now, though, I'm still holding him, but he's definitely someone I'm keeping an eye out and dropping if he doesn't get many starts. And then Alex Nedeljkovic, and we don't know how that situation is going to shake out in Detroit between Husso and Nedeljkovic. There's definitely a goalie battle there. Nedeljkovic had an awful season last year, but he was amazing the season before, so we do know that he can bounce back. So he's definitely not someone that I'm dropping just yet, but if after a week or two of the NHL season, he's not really getting that many starts because Husso is just way outplaying him, he's not someone that I'm going to be keeping on my fantasy roster. And then finally, I have Carey Price and Robin Lehner, who are somehow both 22% rostered. What are you guys doing? These guys are out the entire year. They are not going to be playing. I do not know why 22% of you guys have these guys on your roster. Drop them right away. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. Please leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. And if you do want to take your sport to the next level, the link to my Patreon is down in the description below. Thanks so much, guys, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tip.